I'm muted. I should have known better. Well, hey everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today, and this is your weekly space hangout for Friday, February 20th, 2015. So we got a pile of interesting stories for you today. We're going to be talking about the triple conjunction that you should be able to see like right now. Pluto Turns 2085, a star that passed near the solar system. New images from the NavCam from Rosetta. New images of Pluto, tons of new images of Ceres. Here's our Mars 1, Plumes on Mars. It's going to be a big week, and so because it's a big week, we got a lot of space stories. I thought we would add someone new to the roster this week, so I would like to introduce everyone to Charles Black from SEN, aka the Space Exploration Network. Hey, Charles.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us this week. I've been kind of when did you launch SEN?
The website actually launched in January 2010, but daily space news began December 2011.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been. I'm very grateful for the invite.
Yeah, and I've been sort of pestering you for the last couple of years to come join us because you guys have got a great site. You're publishing tons of great space news, and this is what we need. So we've also got Dave Dickinson. Hey, David.
Hey, still somewhere in Maine, staying warm, getting ready for snowstorm number 19, 20, whatever it is now.
Yeah, we've actually had to abandon Prince Edward Island. It is
wow.
It is completely.
I've been up there before.
No, I've seen houses now starting to disappear under the snowstorm.
Well, we've cleared our roof once, so probably this weekend I'm going to have to clear it again. So.
Yeah. We got Morgan Redberg. Hey, Morgan.
Hey, Fraser. Looking at a big storm here, too.
Oh, really?
Everywhere. Yeah, I thought the East Coast was going to hang on to them this year, but
no, they're going to share.
We've had enough.
We got Ramin Skibba. Tell us about the storm you're experiencing in San Diego, Ramin.
Maybe we'll get a drop of rain.
Oh no! Actually, we're pretty good here on the west coast of Canada too. A lot of people are like, "It's Canada. You guys are like disappearing under snow," and like, not here. It's kind of sunny and warm. So, anyway, so you know that this is a live show. You're free to interact with us, ask your questions about the stories that we're covering. The best way to do that is to use the Q&A app, which is you should be able to see this no matter where you're watching. And I'm going to say hello to Nancy Graziano, Alexander Howlett from Vancouver, just around the corner from me, Bert Wolters, Leonard Lindstrom, Jason Carlson, Mike Mills, Tony Lynch, Richard Clark, Steph Dustbunny, Zeev Kirsch, Guido Bibra. Holy moly, everybody's here. This is awesome. Okay, great. Well, let's get cracking. So first, this is going to be a mixture because Charles is both a special guest and a editor/journalist. So first, Charles, let's talk a bit about SEN and give us a bit of a background on this.
Oh, thanks, Fraser. Yeah, I've just always been interested in space since I was a kid, fascinated by it, and yeah, for a long time I sort of thought I want to create a business doing something about it and talking about space. So I actually set up a company about 16 years ago called Space Internet, which was going to do videos about space, but at the time in '98 no one wanted video on the internet, so that ended up becoming a sort of cloud computing company, and I ended up sort of getting wrapped up running that. But about 7 years ago, I actually bought the SEN domain and started laying the foundations for it. And launched the website quite recently, really, in terms of as a proper business. So we publish space news every day. We've got some great writers. You'll know many of them, like Elizabeth Howell and Irene Klotz and Paul Sutherland. And we've got specialists as well, like Anatoly Zak on Russian space and Srinivas Laxman on Indian space. But what I wanted to do really with SEN was try and do something a little bit different, because there's lots of great sites out there like Universe Today, where you can get your space news, and so I wanted to try and sort of offer a different experience, I think, and so there's a number of areas where we've tried to do something a little bit different. One is all around the user experience, So it's very much been designed around mobiles and tablet and consumers, because about 50–60% of people now are accessing the data on these devices. So we've designed it to work as an app, so you can actually use it as an app on your iPhone or iPad or other device. And also we've gone down the route of being free of adverts. So we've gone for a subscription model for certain types of content. So the news we do is absolutely freely accessible, and we do some great images from people like Damien Peach that are all freely accessible. But one of the other areas we wanted to be different was around what I call expert blogs. So I think there's a lot of people who are really interested in space around the world, and I thought maybe what was slightly missing was the expert opinion on some of these matters. So we've got great expert bloggers like Emily Lakdawala and Phil Plate, Professor Chris Lintott, and some great writers who just give you a slightly different viewpoint potentially, or a greater insight into some of the things that are going on in space. So we've got expert blogs, and then we've also got a product called Data Space, and the idea is there we're putting a lot of space data into databases into a format that's very easy to use with your fingertips on your smartphone. So, for example, we've got the entire history of human spaceflight, and you can sort of live filter on a smartphone as to who's in space now. You can filter by all sorts of criteria like moonwalkers, spacewalkers, female, male, countries, and everything else, and all the data's live and comes out sort of straight at you, and you're using it like an app. So we're trying to focus on doing some things differently, and which we think are interesting for space enthusiasts. And we're really excited just to be doing it, and it's my sort of lifelong passion, and so it's absolutely fantastic to be day in, day out, to be getting great content on SEN. So that's
so now that you've crossed that line from being a real enthusiast about space to joining our hallowed company of actually reporting on and managing sort of the publishing and editing of space stories, how has that changed your perspective on the industry?
Well, it's just great to be doing it full time now. I mentioned this internet company that I set up, so I ended up floating that on the London Stock Exchange, and then I sort of was a bit trapped. I couldn't get out basically because I was the main guy.
Yeah,
and it didn't. Anyway, but about a year or so ago, I engineered a deal and put in some new management, and I was able to sort of hand over the management of that business to free myself up. So it's absolutely fantastic to be in the industry, and it is quite a small world, I think, in terms of the writers and the community, and everyone's very friendly, and you've been great, Fraser, very supportive and helpful, and I think we all I think share a common passion in terms of trying to get as much space content and debate and awareness out there. So I'm just really happy to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody who wants to report on this kind of thing and wants to help share our enthusiasm, they've got as much support from me as I can throw their way. Now, you've made a bit of a controversial direction, which is that you've set up more of a subscription-based service. You're creating a lot of content that you're looking for people to join as subscription. What does a subscription cost on SEN?
So it's $1.50 a week, US dollars, so $6.50 a month. Yeah, we went down this route because we've not had the luxury of sort of being established like yourselves or some others for 15, 20 years, and it just seemed that over the recent years there's a lot more newspapers and magazines have gone down this route and established that there's plenty of people out there prepared to pay for a good experience and good quality content, and I think I'm also quite interested, for example, in Formula One motorsport, and I know that the way I use that is I will look at all the free sites, and then but I also subscribe to some specialist sites because there's certain writers that I enjoy reading about. So I think it's the same really in space. I think we do the space news absolutely free, like everyone else. But I think that there's a percentage of people out there that are going to be keen to read what some of these great expert bloggers have to say, and also the whole fact that it is ad free, so someone ultimately has to pay the writers and for the content, and we're not generating the revenue from the adverts. So it's the price of a cup of coffee a week, and you get an ad-free experience that you can use on your smartphone and tablet and read great writers. So I think it's a really good value proposition, and I'm really encouraged by the way it's been going. We only launched the subscription back in sort of middle of October last year, so I'm really encouraged by how things are going so far.
Yeah, well, it's like a novel thing, right? That you provide a service and people pay money for it. It's it kind of makes sense somehow, as opposed to, advertising. I mean, for me, we're funded by advertising. We've recently made the switch over to Patreon, so people are starting to fund us, through that. It's, we're not putting anything behind a paywall, but we're definitely getting additional services for the people who donate to us every month, and that's been really rewarding, and it's amazing how many people out there really do love what you do, and they really want to support it, and it's just a matter of giving them some ways to participate, and they can see this direct result. It's it's pay for value. The more we can get from Patreon, the more people who will sign up with you and come behind the paywall, the more writers you can bring online, the more content you can produce, the better of an experience, the more of these kinds of databases, and the more coverage. I mean, the more people who sign up with us on Patreon, we can afford to start sending reporters to stories, we can create better high-quality video, we can get animations done, we can try and explain the universe better to you than anything. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
That's one of the key things as to why we've done the subscription as well, and it's about sustainability. It's like, I'm trying to create something. This is my sort of lifelong passion. I want to create something that can just keep going forever. I used to say, well, a sort of crazy thing, that I want to create something that can go on forever in space and time. I used to envisage sort of robots building satellites to film space, and that's one of the things I should mention as well, is that the long-term vision is that the next phase of the business is actually going to be doing more videos, and then phase 4 of the business is actually doing off-world videos. And I want to be sending video cameras around the moon and Mars and other
that sounds amazing
areas. And I don't quite know how we're going to do this yet, but with high-definition video and CubeSat technology, and it's moving very quickly as the technology. So, and the cost of it and the launch costs. There's so many things bringing down launch costs for small satellites. So I need to create something sustainable. So if I can build a really big global community, and we are getting subscribers like our user base from all around the world, we've then got something that's sustainable. We're giving a value product, and on that basis we can then generate profits, which will get reinvested in doing new things and actually ultimately being part of creating a space mission to film.
Oh, it sounds great.
In the solar system.
Okay, well that's awesome. So did you want to stick around then and help us report on some stories?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Okay, so let's get cracking. So Dave Dickinson first.
Yes.
There is a conjunction coming right now.
Yes, tonight, as a matter of fact, just a few hours from now on the East Coast, I'm already seeing some pretty good views from Europe and UK viewers that are clear. We have a good conjunction of the 2-day-old waxing crescent moon, Mars, and Venus. They're all going to fit within a 2-degree wide circle, which is about 4 times the diameter of a full moon tonight. And Mars and Venus are going to have a very close conjunction, less than a degree, I believe. Let's see, 1 point. Looking at it, yeah, right about a 1-degree conjunction tomorrow night. So they're getting very close as well. Venus, of course, is very bright. Venus is bright enough to see right before sunset, if you know right where to look for it. As a matter of fact, you can see the crescent moon tonight before sunset. If you look off to its left, you should be able to see Venus. It's bright enough to see against a nice blue sky. I'm going to be snowshoeing up over the ridge here and trying to get some photographs of it tonight and get a clear horizon, as a matter of fact. And tomorrow night, if you have binoculars, you'll be able to see the 3-day-old waxing crescent moon occult the planet Uranus, which is about 6 magnitude. A lot of people remember the last total lunar eclipse we had last fall. A lot of people got images of Uranus very near the moon. Now it's near the crescent moon, so you should be able to see it with binoculars. And that occultation is going to happen after sunset for eastern North America. So it's positioned for a lot of us if we have clear skies I think it's going to be cloudy here tomorrow night, unfortunately. We're between snowstorms right now, so tonight it's clear.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people in North America don't like to get out in, when we have ISS passes in the summertime, and I announce through the house, hey, there's an International Space Station pass.
Nah.
Everybody runs out. In January, February, everybody's like, oh, cool, and they go back to watching their movie, so they don't really care to go out in January and watch. So to go out through the airlocks and put all their clothes on and go out and watch. But it's going to be a very neat conjunction. And another interesting thing is happening observationally. This is kind of still developing. Me and Bob King were talking about this via email. I don't know if he put his article out about it yet. SOHO, there is a comet that was a sun-grazing comet, and there's nothing really big news about that. SOHO sees sun-grazing comets all the time. This one seems to be brightening after its pass, and there's some talk about it. It's in the 2nd or 3rd magnitude range right now, which is fairly bright for a post-perihelion SOHO comet. There's some talk on the message boards right now that this one might be visible to imagers in the coming few days once it gets away from the sun. This is still developing right now, so I was kind of on the fence of whether this was interesting enough to report about. Me and Bob were talking about it, and I think he may have his article up now, or he's drafting it. So
yeah, no, he did put a quick article together, and I'm sort of hesitant to pull the trigger on it until we can get a little more confirmation.
This is a wait and see. A very good Twitter handle to follow is at Sungrazing Comets. He actually works with SOHO and does a lot of this tracking, and that's what I've been following very closely. I'm still on the wait and see for this one, but it's interesting. We could have a bright comet, or a naked eye comet here in the coming days.
That'd be great. Well, as we all know, the universe owes me a comet, so
yes.
This one might be the one.
You never know.
Okay, great. So let's move on. I want to talk about. Let's see. Ramin, do you want to talk about your new information from the AAAS? Not
Sure.
to be confused with the AAAS.
Yes, it's confusing acronyms, but it's the American Association for the Advancement of Science. They're the ones who publish Science Magazine, which is the North American counterpart to Nature. And in fact, they also just started a new, I think it's an open access journal called Science Advances. So that actually just started. So there were a couple of astronomy-related events there, but I think the most exciting results, in my opinion, involved building galaxies, and the subtitle of the session was Some Assembly Required. And so it was, I think that the neat results that they had involved gas, because it's really hard to observe gas in galaxies directly. You kind of try to infer it from what you can from, say, infrared images or spectra. But it's really hard. And the thing is, you need gas in galaxies in order to form stars and to have the galaxies grow. And so the gas is there. It's hard to see it. And now with a couple of new and upgraded telescopes, people are obtaining more information that they didn't have before. And I think one of the most exciting things were some results presented from ALMA, which is the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array in Chile. And so while previously people could only observe gas, say in our own galaxy, people are now seeing gas in galaxies that are many light years away. And so you may or may not have heard of an ALMA result involving the Sculptor Galaxy, or NGC 253, as astronomers call it. And what people found here was that there was this they had this amazing image that they showed, which was superimposed on a Hubble image, and you can see they looked at the center of this galaxy at a star-forming region, or a stellar nursery, as they call it, and it just was just exploding with star formation. There's tons of gas there, and it's just forming stars at a rate maybe 1,000 times what you would see in the Milky Way. So this is what they call a star-bursting galaxy, or a starburst. And so what they found is that these star-forming regions are different from what you see in the Milky Way or other quote-unquote normal galaxies. And so it's not just how many star-forming regions you have, it's basically how massive they are and how dense they are. And it turns out this one that they studied, which was really spectacular, and I don't want to stress that it's pretty rare, it's just very dense. And so all the gas is there. It doesn't take much time for some gas to collapse and form new stars. And so it's so I thought that was pretty cool. And,
So it's just this
yeah,
this
go ahead.
ability to see gas and in other galaxies. They're really starting to advance that science. They see it all in the Milky Way, but I guess they had to postulate that it was there because we see it happening. But now they actually have the technology, thanks to Alma, to actually see this stuff coming together.
Absolutely. And so it's really improving the picture that people have of how galaxies form and evolve, because people had to try to infer something about the gas, and basically they're making guesses. And now finally, with these images, people are able to see a wider range of galaxies and look in more depth within them. And so this information is really vital. So it's pretty exciting.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
No, you didn't attend the meeting, did you?
Oh yeah, I was there. And so yeah, so those results were presented by Kartik Sheth, who's at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory. There's also an interesting result presented by Felix J. Lockman, who's at the same place. And this is a result which is not totally new, but I think he had some new images of it, basically. And there's this thing called the Smith cloud, which is basically this cloud of gas which may just be floating by itself just gas and nothing else. And it looks like it's coming in, and maybe in 20, 30 million years it's going to hit one of the spiral arms in the Milky Way. And then there'll be a lot more stars and planets and solar systems and everything. And so that was a pretty neat result.
That is
too.
interesting.
That's awesome. All right, let's move on. Man, so much to talk about this time. So let's talk about Morgan. Let's talk about the new NavCam images from Rosetta.
Right. Last weekend, Rosetta made what might be its closest approach to the comet, and it came within 6 kilometers of the surface of the comet. And I have an image, actually a mosaic of 4 images taken by the navigational camera, NavCam, during this approach. And of course, this is the lower resolution of the 2 cameras.
Just to be clear,
we've yet to see any science images from this. They'll be downlinked and processed, I think Emily Lakdawala said, within the next week, but that's no guarantee that we'll see them anytime soon. But even these NavCam images offered a remarkable view of this comet because the resolution here was, for the first time, less than a meter per pixel. Every pixel in this image is about 75 centimeters. So you can imagine the smallest things you're seeing here are about the size of like a dining room chair or something like that. And what we see is just kind of reinforcing the picture that we've had of 67P since Rosetta got there, which is that its surface is extremely varied. We could see areas that are extremely smooth, say in this region to the upper left.
Yeah, Philae should have landed there.
Yeah, it seems like that could be, silt or dust may have collected there. Then we have, for example, on the right here, we have some larger, many meters in size images, like rocks or something. And then in this middle region, we have this sort of intermediate debris field. And so you really couldn't characterize the surface of this comet as being made up of any one particular kind of object. It seems like we're seeing a wider and wider variety of objects the closer and closer we look to the surface of the comet. And as we get the science cam images of this same region, we're going to be able to look in even higher detail, and we're going to see the surface in kind of unprecedented detail.
That's fantastic. I wonder how tall those cliffs are that were over on the side of the image.
So I saw a picture from one of these views that had one of the Great Pyramids of Egypt kind of superimposed onto the image.
Oh, interesting.
And they're roughly the same height, suggesting that we're talking about cliffs that at the most are maybe sort of on the order of 100 meters or so. But the full sort of really detailed shape model of the comet hasn't resolved that sort of thing yet. The shape model that they released late last year was not, I don't think, at the resolution to kind of discriminate between those particular kinds of features.
That is cool. All right, and so are we going to get a closer view? Is it going to do an even closer flyby, or is this
I think this is the closest scheduled flyby, and what they're going to do now is sort of step back and over the course of the next few months fly by at increasing distances between 6 kilometers and like a couple hundred kilometers to get a sense of, well, how does because it's not just cameras that are on the spacecraft. In fact, taking pictures is only one of a number of important functions that Rosetta is carrying out. And now we're going to move into the phase where we're measuring things like the dust environment, the electric and magnetic field environment, the plasma environment around the comet, and those are going to change as you go farther and farther from the comet, and we need to measure those both remotely by looking in different places, but also by going to different locations and physically measuring, well, what is the environment around Rosetta in those places.
I wonder if they will, in the end, decide to land Rosetta on the comet, like they did with asteroid Eros. With the Near mission. Like, not that it was ever intended to land, but because Philae wasn't able to make its landing, I wonder if they'll, at the end of the mission, just slowly have it try to land.
It makes the most sense, I think, as a way to end the mission, because otherwise you're just going to be stuck in orbit basically forever around the comet, and if you try to land, at least you get one more opportunity to get very close-in measurements to the surface.
Yeah.
But that kind of thing is fully dependent on the fuel left on the spacecraft at the end of the mission.
Yeah, and so that's it. Anyway, I'm gonna pitch that to the ESA folks. Just land in the end, even though it was never meant to do so.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, let's move on. So Charles, let's sort of break you in. So let's talk about the Mars One announced their final 100 candidates to be sent on their one-way trip to Mars.
Yeah, that's right. Mars One is a private organization, and the plan is to send the first colony of humans to live on Mars. And as you say, it's a one-way trip, and originally I think they were targeting 2023 as the date the first four would land. That's slipped slightly to, I think, 2025. And what they've been doing is a recruitment process over the last couple of years, which started with over 200,000 people, and now it's whittled down to the last 100 candidates. I think there's 50 females and 50 males. And so that's interesting. I think there's a number of reasons which are causing a little bit of concern amongst watchers of this project. The first is the whole issue of how it's funded, which is through a reality TV series. And the second concern that came out this week was that they're waiting to press the button on building some rovers that are going to go ahead of the actual first crewed missions. And I think they've been provisionally they've got a contract for Lockheed Martin to build these. And they've got to decide by the summer whether to give the go-ahead. And there's some suggestions that they haven't given the go-ahead for these at the moment. So I think a lot of concerns about the whole feasibility of the funding of the mission, which is a shame because I think it's certainly promoting a lot of debate and interest in the whole concept of should we go to Mars, and if we're going to Mars, why can't it be a round trip, and why does it have to be one way? So I think Mars One's performing a really interesting role in raising awareness and debate, which is very healthy. But I think there's a lot of skepticism out there about its chances of really happening.
I think one thing that was really interesting is whoever's running the public relations over there is doing just a masterful job. I was sort of watching the news feeds, and I've got a trigger for Mars, and I was seeing every single place where the various applicants had been accepted. Their local news agencies were running stories about, Vancouver woman has been selected to in the final group for Mars, and I was seeing, every single location clearly had gotten on the story and was able to get the word out there. So they're doing a really good job of the public relations side of this. They've done a really good job of sort of building some enthusiasm for it. And they also did a really interesting program over the last few months where they've been picking various scientific projects, plants for Mars, things like that, various kinds of propulsion systems and some of the little pieces that are going to need to be worked out. And as you said, people have been doing a lot of really skeptical articles about whether or not this is going to happen. And how do the rest of you guys feel? What do you think, Morgan? Do you think this is going to happen? Oh, go ahead, David. David, what's your opinion about the mission?
I'm kind of skeptical about it. I'm almost waiting for somebody over at the Onion to start a Venus One campaign or something like that, or we choose to go to Pluto or something like that.
A one-way trip to Venus. That would be.
Yeah, because there's not a rocket sitting on the pad. I mean, there's some ideas with SpaceX right now, but the hardware is just. I think if anything comes out of this, maybe we're going to learn how to be. We need to learn to go to Antarctica and be self-sustainable and live without resupply there or in low Earth orbit first, then go to Mars. I think so. If anything comes out of it, I think it might be that learning those techniques of how to go to Mars and live off the land.
Yeah, that's probably more realistic.
Yeah, it's a plan that's really too ambitious for what their funding level is. To build these rovers is going to cost them hundreds of millions, at a minimum, perhaps more than that. And the fact that they're holding back right now suggests that they don't have the funding even for that. And we're talking about probably, realistically, tens of billions of dollars to safely take people to the surface of Mars and return them to the Earth.
Even just a one-way trip.
Yeah, just a one-way trip. Even for that, it's billions of dollars. And there's no television program in history that's made billions of dollars, and even if this was the most successful one ever, you need this money up front, not after the television show starts to air. And it's not clear that anyone's interested in fronting them the billions of dollars they'll need to land these people there.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this is that eventually humans will go to Mars. And the one-way trip to Mars isn't the craziest idea. I mean, it's actually the most feasible way to do this. If you want to set up a permanent colony on Mars, then you send people on a one-way trip to Mars. It's the cheapest. You don't have to bring them back. They can live off the land, as it were. But when one is successful, it will be because they've learned the lessons from all the people that failed to pull this off. And so Mars One, if they don't succeed, they will at least be publicly figuring out all of the pain points. What are all the things that they weren't able to figure out, all the ways that they weren't able to raise the money, all of the technology they weren't able to get into place. And even if they are successful, it's like all of the ways that people died. And as horrible as that is, when humans go to Mars, people are going to die. And they're going to die in new and unusual and horrible ways. And this is the spirit of exploration. I mean, when people started to make these round the world navigation by boat, people died. When people, yeah, and so this is and because they didn't realize what kinds of ships would be required for being able to round Cape Horn and just the kinds of how do you prevent scurvy over long periods of time. Like they just didn't know. And so I think that when I read the skeptical pieces about this, people are like, they don't have enough money, it's going to fail. And the underlying message is like we shouldn't try. Like, you haven't got it figured out, so you shouldn't even try. But, people look at the stuff that Elon Musk is doing. He built a profitable rocket company to make this work. And so maybe he's going to come in and scoop up the things that they've learned so far and then adapt on it and expand on it. But we got to move forward and we got to try and figure this out. And so I think
it's not that they shouldn't try. It's more that they're trying and they're not going to get off the ground. And the question is, well, now that we know this, and if we don't know it yet, we'll find it out soon. How can we expand the base of people involved with this to make the next opportunity more successful? How can we convince, your Bill Gates or your Elon Musk or your Paul Allen to fund this sort of thing up front with some sort of assurance that there's going to be a return on the back end? Because if you can do that, it opens up all the doors. And the good part of Mars One is that they're exploring those kinds of ideas. And we need, in astronomy and space exploration to diversify ourselves away from government funding. And so we need to explore all of these that we can do. And so there's absolutely no shame in what they're trying to do. It's just probably a little too early to be successful.
So Charles, what do you think is going to be, when a human mission does go to Mars, when do you think it's going to happen, and what kind of mission do you think it'll be?
I think, just commenting on what you've been saying on Mars One, I think it's brilliant that they're trying, because already they're promoting debates like we're having today, and it's getting people thinking about the whole idea. And suddenly, the idea of a colony on Mars doesn't sound completely crazy and left field now. It's like, okay, this is potentially a realistic project. But I think in terms of that project, as you say, potentially they could team up with SpaceX in the future, and they'll have learned so much about the preparations and the type of things that they have to go through to prepare for it. So Mars One is a really good catalyst for the whole debate and project of getting humans to Mars. To answer your question, well, that's a difficult one, but you would think sort of mid-20, probably 2030s, I think, realistically. But I personally think we should just wait till we have the technology to get back as well, and I think that's the way we should do this, rather than a one-way trip. But that's just a personal. Yeah. But it's going to happen. I'm absolutely convinced it will happen in the next 15 to 20 years.
So does anyone disagree with Charles' opinion of that?
They need to hurry up, because I'm getting old.
Yeah, well, that's exactly.
Like, when I was a kid back in the 1970s, I was supposed to have a summer home on Phobos by now. So it's just like
Phobos is going to crash into Mars, right?
It's still more likely that a government's going to do it than a private company.
Yeah.
I'll make sure it's insured.
I guess there are sociological issues with a one-way trip. I mean, you can imagine, a mutiny or something, or people not getting along, or especially if there are people who are not trained, like trained astronauts. There's maybe less. I don't know. I think there's just complications that you can imagine coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, these are the kinds of things that people need to explore, right?
I guess my attitude is to show me the rocket, because 2018 we've got SLSs coming up, and there's a Falcon 9 Heavy. Maybe I think next year they want to test launch that, but we need the rocket to get there first. So once that's sitting on the pad, I'll be a little more. I was a little more excited with Dennis Tito's 2018 Mars flyby idea. But 2018 is really not that far away. When you look at it, it was maybe on the grim edge of what we could probably do if we get everything in line at the SLS or Falcon 9 by then. But I just don't see it. It's 2018's coming right up. So
yeah, I think it's going to happen from Musk. I think Musk and SpaceX will probably do it sooner than people are expecting. But still, in the late 2020s, early 2030s, I still think that's about the right time frame, because there's just, how are people going to breathe? Where are they going to get their water? How are they going to be able to make fuel? How will they be protected from radiation? How are they going to grow their food? How are they going to not go crazy? The list goes on and on and on of all the things. And just like read The Martian, if you want a really great just example of just how ruthless that planet is going to be to live on. It is not the Arizona desert. It is the Arizona desert in space. So. Okay, well let's move on. Let's talk about Pluto turning 85. David, happy birthday, Pluto!
Yeah, this
only
year.
85. I would think it was 4.6 billion years old, but it's not.
Yeah, and with the 243-year orbit, I believe, we haven't been watching Pluto the entire time. It was discovered in the constellation Gemini, actually, and it's only over in Sagittarius now, so it gives you some idea. Pluto was discovered 85 years ago this week in 1930 by Clyde Tombaugh. Now, Tombaugh passed away in the late 1990s, but New Horizons is going to give us some new images of Pluto. Matter of fact, there's some more that came out this week I think we're going to talk about too. That this July we're going to finally put a face on Pluto after all those years. But it's just interesting that there's a whole human story behind the discovery of Pluto, and then the controversy of planet versus dwarf planet versus Plutoid versus. I think the controversy is going to come back around again this summer as we get a good look at Pluto and the moons and characterize it a little more.
Alan Stern will stir it up if no one else does.
Yeah. Now Pluto is smaller than our moon. So it's if you put Pluto in orbit around a planet, there would be no controversy there. There are moons, but of course, then again, there are moons bigger than Mercury too. So we're not talking about kicking Mercury out, but there's a very interesting human story about the naming of Pluto. The girl was Venetia Burney, named Pluto when she was only 6 years old in 1930. She just passed away a couple years ago too. There's a very interesting documentary on her. She passed away in 2009, and just the whole controversy. I remember back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of jokes going around as we saw Pluto's first moon, Charon, and we got an idea of the mass of the entire system, how Pluto was slowly diminishing through the 20th century, and there was the joke going around that Pluto was going to disappear entirely by the 1980s as you watch that graph of mass and diameter just go down further and further. I've actually only ever seen Pluto once through the Flandreau Observatory's telescope in Tucson. One time we actually, looks like a 14th magnitude star. But
we got it in the virtual star party one time. Which was
yes, we did. I think I was in that one time. Yeah, so we saw it there too. Again, it looks like a 14th magnitude star, but it's we're finding a lot more interesting objects out there in the Kuiper Belt. But Pluto was the first back in the 1930s.
That's awesome. Well, Morgan, why don't we use that to dovetail into the new images that we've gotten from New Horizons?
Right. New Horizons has been capturing images of Pluto as it approaches Pluto. We're still about 3 months away from its closest approach to Pluto on July 14th of this year, and we're still about 2 months away from it getting its resolution to be better than that of the Hubble Space Telescope. But already we're starting to see the benefits of a mission like New Horizons over something like Hubble observations. So what you're looking at here on the left is a series of images taken by the navigational camera on New Horizons. And you'll notice a lot of sort of out of focus looking stars, a big blur in the middle. That blur is Pluto and Charon. It's extremely bright when imaged like this, and so it kind of blows out the center of the image. If we subtract all of that off, we get the image on the right. And then if you draw magic circles around the dots, they become pretty easy to find. And those are Pluto's next largest moons, Hydra and Nix. And Hydra and Nix were discovered substantially later than Charon. We know Charon is a large percent the size of Pluto, while Hydra and Nix are much smaller. They're sort of like 300 kilometers across or so. And because of that, we haven't been looking at them often or for a long time, and so we don't have a precise idea of where their orbit is. But now that New Horizons has acquired a view of them, we'll be able to look at them every 2 days for the next couple of months, and that means that we're going to get a very accurate picture of what orbit these guys have. And that's a benefit of continuing observing that you can do with something like New Horizons when there's no way that we could afford to task Hubble to look at Pluto every 2 days for the course of several months. And these new orbits will allow us to both better understand the path that New Horizons will take, which is important to make sure it doesn't crash into anything, but they could also help us understand what else is in the Pluto system. Because, of course, in addition to Pluto and Charon, there's a variety of smaller moons, and often we discover new bodies, new moons, things like that, based on the strange orbits of things that we can see. And so that's a possibility in the coming months as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get Alan Stern on in a few months to talk about what's about to happen and what kinds of things they may be discovering. It's going to be good. Friend of the show.
Very good chance we'll find more moons.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's strange to me to think of Pluto as blowing out the glare of Pluto blowing out the image being 14th magnitude from Earth.
Yeah, and of course the other possibility, right, is if there's some kind of ring system, which is still
right. This is something that they were really worried about a couple of years ago, and Mark Showalter, an astronomer at the SETI Institute, who has perhaps discovered more moons in the solar system than anybody else in sort of the modern era, led the effort with Hubble to try and image a possible ring system around Pluto. And instead, they discovered a couple of new moons, which suggests that there's possibly even more moons out there that we haven't seen yet. But New Horizons will continue to look for rings as it approaches, because even though the rings would likely be made of extremely fine particles, like no larger than flecks of dust, they could do substantial damage to the spacecraft if they hit at the extreme speed that New Horizons is traveling at. And so that's
And the
something
problem
they'll
is they've
keep.
got that 4-hour delay for signals to go to, and then another 4-hour delay to get back to even tell New Horizons to dodge.
Right. So you have to find them and steer well clear of them if that's going to happen. And I know the New Horizons team has worked a lot for months and even years on developing, well, what do we do if this happens? What do we do if that happens? Well in advance, so that these things can be taken care of even with the large late time delay.
That's awesome. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. We've got a couple more stories, and then we'll try and answer some questions as well. So, Dave, a star passed through the Oort cloud.
Yeah.
Just a few tens of thousands of years ago.
This one really caught my eye, and this is kind of an interesting story because we talked a few months ago about a star that had passed maybe about a light year and a half from the solar system about a 250,000 years ago. And this one actually, it passed, the modeling of it, this was in the Astrophysical Journal, and they're saying that 70,000 years ago, which really wasn't that long ago, is about the beginning of the last ice age, that this star that they're calling Schultz's star after the discovery passed about 0.8 light years away. So that it definitely puts it on the outer edge of our Oort cloud when it passed through. The technical, it was discovered by the WISE Space Telescope, and the phone number designation for this is Y07200846. And it's just interesting that they were saying, of course, I did a back-of-the-envelope calculation. They were saying that it was about 11th magnitude. I'm always thinking observationally, like what this would have looked like when it passed through our sky, which is kind of faint. I came up with about 7th magnitude. This star is about 20 light years away, and it's 18th magnitude now. So it was about 600 some odd times closer then. So I came up that it should have been about maybe 12 magnitudes brighter. It's a red dwarf star, has a brown dwarf companion around it. And another thing I was thinking of is like, darn, if that had been here now, that would have been something we potentially could have jump-started interstellar exploration by having something that is about 5 times closer than Alpha Centauri to kind of hop out to and get a kickstart there. And another thing interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe this is the same thing, that people have been asking about comets. Like, since it passed through the Oort cloud, would it have kicked a bunch of comets towards the Earth? And the answer that I think we got is that maybe we haven't seen them yet. They're still on the way. That's what I was going to say.
You think of something like one trans-Neptunian object, Sedna, that has an aphelion at its most distant point, 936 AU from the Sun, and that's on a 12,000-year orbit. So 70,000 years ago, there's a good possibility we may see an uptick in comets like a few million years from now. That there may be maybe not a rain of comets, but an increase in cometary activity that got stirred up by this. But that was the first thing I started thinking reading this too, is because I believe it was over 50,000 AU is what this computes to. And there's been talk about over the years of what they call the nemesis hypothesis of that there's like a brown dwarf or a dim companion to our sun. But that's been they've looked through that causes the periodic 26 million year wave of comets with extinctions that follow after it. But they've looked at the impact records on Mars and the Moon, which are the Moon keeps a pretty good record of all those impacts aren't eroded down there, and you've kind of got a frozen in time clock of when these waves of mass impact. We don't see that 26 million year pattern on the Moon or Mars or anywhere else that we look at. So this is separate from Nemesis and of course the whole 2012 hype of Nibiru. And that there's some kind of it is intriguing though to think it's not entirely ruled out there may be a distant brown dwarf or a very submass companion out there. But that's an entirely different discussion. And the NEO-WISE survey is actually looking within a few years, and then when you get things like the LSST out there that's going to be looking at fainter and fainter objects, we'll probably find more of these red and brown dwarf companion objects, maybe not to our sun, but that had passed through our solar system, millions of years ago.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, and then another big piece of news this week is that amateur astronomers spotted weird, mysterious plumes on Mars. And Charles, nobody knows what they are.
That's right. The actual amateur astronomers, there was Damien Peach, Don Parker and, I'm just looking this up, Wayne Jaska, I think. I apologize if I've pronounced his surname incorrectly. But yeah, they actually took these photos studying when they were imaging Mars back in 2012 and noticed these plumes that actually were leaking about 150 miles, 250 kilometers into space. And it turns out that the Hubble Space Telescope as well had picked up some similar images back in the late 90s, sort of 97. And there was a paper out this week in Nature which essentially just sort of suggested they don't really know what it is still, but there's a few ideas. It could be connected with auroral emissions and some other complex reasons, which I'm no scientist and probably aren't well enough to explain. But I really like the story because it shows that the role of the amateur astronomer in helping make discoveries. So we're talking about images from amateur astronomers and the Hubble Space Telescope, so it's a lovely example of that. And another interesting thing is that we don't know what it is. And another reason I like the story is that potentially the ExoMars orbiter, which is the European Space Agency's orbiter, which is going to launch, I think, in 2016, they think that might be able to be in a position in orbit to actually study this phenomenon if it reoccurs. Or so there's potentially we've got a science spacecraft that can go and try and find the answers that we don't know yet.
Yeah, it's great when especially when amateurs can help contribute and help notice things. I mean, there's so many telescopes being pointed at the sky all the time, and it's great when they can start to find some of this stuff. That's just
when I first saw this, I thought Mars isn't at opposition right now. This has to be an earlier discovery from a few years ago, because that's the first thing that tripped my radar. It's like amateurs usually only observe Mars once every 2 years, right around opposition. So it's, in a way, this is an older news story that kind of got in vogue again, in a way.
Yeah.
It also shows the value of publicly archived data, because these Hubble observations were taken back in 1997, 15 years before the amateurs made this discovery, and they certainly weren't looking for these evidence of these plumes when they made these Mars observations. But the fact that other researchers, 20 years later, were able to go back and look that data up and confirm that this was in fact a real observation is a real big boon, and it makes every observation that a telescope like Hubble makes even more valuable, because you don't know what you'll get from it in the future.
Yeah.
Another way amateur astronomers are contributing are with citizen science and crowdsourced science. That's actually something I saw more of than before at the AAAS meeting. There's like Galaxy Zoo, CosmoQuest, Space Warps, and a bunch of other projects just popping up. So it seems like there's a lot of ways people are contributing.
Richard Strassel asks, Martian cannons firing cylinders? Should we be expecting tripods?
I read that book.
Book? That happened. Okay, so I guess the last thing just before we go is, and this was sort of posted by the WSH crew into their community, is we got some cool new pictures of Ceres. Did you have those images, Morgan?
Yep, I could bring that up here. So we've been monitoring Ceres as dawn approaches it, taking better and better resolution images, and what we've been seeing has been this sort of strange white spot or spots on the surface. And the most curious thing about these spots is the fact that they persist every time we get a higher resolution image. And so here you can see both sides of Ceres as seen by dawn, and you can see maybe 2 or 3 white spots on the right and maybe a big one on the left. And scientists have really no good explanation for what these things are. I saw a quote from one of the dawn team members that said they expected to find things that they weren't prepared for, but they didn't expect to be completely baffled by what they were seeing. And that's how they've been describing these white spots. And so we're still not close enough for dawn to really definitively identify what they are, but the fact that we keep seeing them over and over again tells us that they are real, and they're going to be probably one of the first things that dawn really focuses on when it arrives at Ceres next month.
I think what's interesting is you can see those other craters, all the way around, and a lot of them really look like the kinds of craters that we see on the moon. And so the one hypothesis that these are snow-filled craters, but now we see so many craters that clearly are craters and they're not filled with snow. So the mystery continues.
Yeah, it's something to look forward to when dawn arrives in March.
Absolutely fantastic. All right, let's see if I can get a couple of questions here. Cecil Morgan wonders, could we draft Justin Bieber and Paris Hilton for Mars One? I think they have to volunteer. I don't know if we can draft people for Mars One. So I think if they did volunteer, I think they would have a high chance of being selected.
That's one way to fund this, is send 2 parallel missions, one full of celebrities who are pretty much doomed, and one full of your actual candidates, and the one funds the other.
That's kind of what they did in Restaurant at the End of the Universe when they evacuated the planet of Golga Friction. Yeah.
James Carlson says, Dawn orbital insertion on 3.5 around Ceres. Still no confirmation of the alien base with a high albedo. So I guess Dawn is going to go into orbit on March 5th, and that's at that point we should expect the alien base laser to take it out. So we've got a few more days left with Dawn before we have to lose it. Okay, so James Carlson asks, one-way trip ethics, will the Martian explorers need an end-it-all pill at some point, given the inevitable? I don't know. I mean, I think that Mars itself is an end-it-all pill. Like, you go anywhere that isn't in your dome, and Mars will take care of the problem for you. But it's an interesting question, right? Ben Etherington wants to know, David, how do you make that beard look so good?
20 below in very dry air.
Right. So you really this is function before fashion.
Pretty much.
But can you say the same about the jaunty mustache, David? Come on.
It's utilitarian.
All right. Let's see what else. There's a bunch that are just like total rabbit holes. I can't go down them. Zeev Kirsch, I just want to thank you for posting all of the questions that you have. There's some awesome questions here, but they're just like each one is like an hour for us to like do. Nancy Grazio notes that anyone going to Mars can just eat potatoes. So anyone who's read the Martian will know what that's a reference to. Okay, one last thing. Richard Strassel asks, could the Mars cloud be volcanic or a big impact?
It couldn't be an impact because it was seen in 2012 by amateurs and in 1997 by Hubble, and it's confirmed to have been in the same location. I think they probably would have checked volcanism pretty quickly, and had there been any sort of volcano in the area. I think the leading hypothesis right now is that it has something to do with the aurora, because that particular location happens to be one of the most aurorally active locations on Mars, but that doesn't fully explain it.
All right.
Cool. I know we see orographic clouds on Mars, but I think these were much higher than those.
Right. The highest clouds we'd previously seen were like 100 kilometers, and this was seen up at 250 kilometers over this 25-year span.
I don't know. I think the
15 years,
cylinder launching tripod deployment is starting to sound a little legit. Cool. Well, let's wrap things up. As always, we'll give everyone a chance. Before we do, I just want to do another big shout out to the WSH crew, the Weekly Space Hangout crew. This is the active community on Google Plus that has sort of surrounds and encourages us to continue our to do this show, and they're a great team of super space fans, and I highly recommend, if you enjoyed this show, you should be one of their members. And we've been working closer and closer with the crew to actually help us find more guests and more panel members. So if you want to sort of have a role in the direction that the show takes, this is where you're going to want to go and be a participant of. All right, so Charles, where can people find out more?
SEN.com, nice easy domain. Space Exploration Network, SEN.com, and do check us out and follow us on Twitter. We're at SEN. So.
All right. That was okay. I think I can do this better. So if you love space and you really want to help contribute to really great space reporting, you need to go to SEN. You need to, join as a member and get access to all of these articles and get access to a lot of these tools. If you're serious about space and you're serious about astronomy, you need to do this, and that way you can directly contribute to the kinds of articles that you love. And this is how this works. Like, people can't work for free, but if you're able to contribute just a couple of bucks a month, you can help get great space and astronomy content written. So get on that. There.
Thank you. Done beautifully.
No problem. I'm glad to help. Dave Dickinson, where do people find out more?
Let's see. This week I was active on my own site, AstroGuys, Listosaur, and of course Universe Today. And next week I am busily researching a post on quasars you can observe with your backyard telescope for Universe Today. It's becoming a little more involved than I thought, but it's going to be interesting.
Oh, that sounds great. And if people haven't already seen your terrific 101 things to see in 2015, you wrote the preview and now you're just running through them one item at a time as they come up. So
I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years. I started on my own site and I've done it on Universe Today for 2 years now, and it's really it may be an e-book here in a few years, the size it's getting. So
absolutely.
I always say it's a blog post that takes me 6 months to write, pretty much.
Well, I mean, this was what happened with the What's Up 2006 that Tammy Plotner wrote for us back in 2006 and 2007, and of course she passed away just last week. And but I think if anyone could pick up that torch and keep rolling with it, it's going to be you. So if you want to talk about publishing a book, I'm all ears. Morgan Redberg, where do people find out more?
Well, right after the show, you can find me over in the Google Plus Space community. Just go to plus.google.com, click Communities, and choose Space. I'd be happy to answer all of those long, drawn-out questions that were in the chat and we didn't get a chance to talk about, plus anything else that we might have missed this week in the rundown. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at Morgan Renberg.
What a fantastic service that you do, Morgan. That you go and you just answer questions. Remember, he's a planetary geologist, people. This is your chance to ask all of your planetary geology questions from somebody who knows what he's talking about, as opposed to like me. So take him up on this. Go to the Google Plus Space community and participate in the conversation with Morgan. Thank you so much, Morgan. And Ramin, where do we find out more?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Ramin Skibba, so just at my name. And I wrote an article on Universe Today if you want to find out more about building galaxies and the role of gas and stars. I might write more about the AAAS meeting on my own website if I have time. And my website is raminskibba.net. And there's all sorts of astronomy news, some science policy stuff there. And one last thing is I've been under pressure to finish a paper that I'm going to submit to the Astrophysical Journal. So basically, I'm threatened to finish it and submit it next week. So it's if you're interested in the distribution of galaxies and dark matter and how those are related, then stay tuned, and I'll probably put something on Twitter about that and give more details. So there
What's
you
it
go.
going to be called?
It's called Lambda CDM, so like the cold dark matter models of what's it called, the galaxy clustering from redshift 0.2 to 1.2. So going out.
You know what? Talk to me. I'll help you come up with a better title for that.
Okay, it's 8 billion years of cosmic time, but it's
that sounds better. That's starting to sound better. Cool. And of course, I'm Fraser Cain. You can see the work we're doing over on Universe Today, the videos that we're doing on YouTube. If you click subscribe, and then you'll get both the Weekly Space Hangout and the Guide to Space videos that we're doing. We're just about to cross 40,000 YouTube subscribers, which is awesome.
Cool.
And I'm really proud of the new videos that we've been doing. They're pretty funny, and they're a lot of fun. So definitely check those out. Akin on Twitter, and we will see you all next week. So thanks for watching.